Welcome to our next unit. Our next unit deals with the structure and functioning of the human ear. We have been looking at the senses and our perception, the amazing ability that our human brain has to make sense of the world around it, to be able to experience, to see, and to hear the things in the world. We're now dealing with the unit on hearing and sound and the perception of auditory stimulus. So we're going to be looking in this lecture at the structure and functioning of the human ear. And in the next lecture, we will look at some of the difficulties, the impairments, the problems that can occur in human functioning of the ear and perception of sound, and what we can do as educators to support learners who are having these kinds of difficulties. So first we're going to have a look at some of the terms that we need to understand, and we're going to start with the term of audition or hearing. So this is the stimulus for our sense of hearing, which comes from the pressure waves in the air, and that is a form of mechanical energy. So what we call sound is actually pressure waves in the air, which is a conducting medium. There are also pressure waves in water. If you think of the songs of whales and dolphins when they're swimming, people have been able to record the sounds that they make, and it's a kind of a language where they speak to each other and their ears are able to pick up the pressure waves in the water. So audition or hearing is the transduction of pressure waves in air into the neural signal in the nerves, and we've spoken at length about nerves and how they function. So the pressure waves are converted into a neural signal that is made possible by the structure and the intricate structure of the human ear. And we're going to look at that in some detail. Another thing that we need to understand is the idea of pitch. So the pressure waves in the air are moving along in a wave-like form, and so waves have a number of cycles that they are moving through the medium in a set time. So we look at frequency of these cycles per second, and that gives us the pitch of the particular sound. So a low frequency, when you have fewer cycles going through at one time, gives us a low pitch. And if there are many cycles in the same time frame, that is a high frequency, and then the sound's pitch, it sounds much higher to us. So the technical term for measuring the frequency is the hertz, and it is a measure of the number of cycles in 1 second. So 1 hertz equals 1 cycle per second of the pressure within the air, the waves. So the sound wave's frequency gives us the pitch. The higher the frequency, the higher the perceived pitch of that particular sound. So the next term that we need to understand when we are dealing with sound is this idea of amplitude. And amplitude is the size, the vertical size of the sound waves. So it relates to the amount of compression and expansion of the air molecules in the medium that it's being conducted in. So the sound wave's amplitude gives us this perception of being loud or being soft. Amplitude, if it's a high amplitude, the sound is loud, and if it's a low amplitude, the sound is quiet. And amplitude is measured in decibels, which is a measure of the physical pressure that occurs at the eardrum. So it's the amount of air molecules that are hitting the eardrum, and that is causing the pressure. So we can see that a loud sound has got much more pressure on the eardrum than a soft sound. So we're now going to have a look at the actual structures within the ear. So if we take a typical drawing of the human ear in cross section, then we see that there are various different parts of the physical structures of the ear, and we are going to follow a wave of air, the acoustic wave. We're going to follow that from when it hits the outer ear all the way in through to the nerve. So when the pressure waves strike the ear, they find their way through the outer canal, setting it into vibration, and these air pressure waves are converted into mechanical and neural waves in the ear. We're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. So the ear has three main parts: the external ear, the middle ear, and the internal ear. And then the internal ear leads directly to the nerves that connect the ear to the temporal lobes of the brain, where sound is integrated and made sense of, and where our idea of perception comes from, and we make meaning of the sound waves that we are hearing. So we're going to start by looking at the external ear and have a look at what the parts are in the external ear. So the outer part is made up of three sections. What we see on the side of everybody's head is the pinna, which is used to collect and to channel the sound waves into the auditory canal. The sound waves then pass down the auditory canal. So sound waves go into the pinnae, they are compressed and channeled down through the canal and hit the exterior of a very fine, very small membrane known as the tympanic membrane, or simply your eardrum. So you can compare the eardrum to an actual tympani drum, which has a taunt membrane over a hollow tube, and it vibrates when the sound waves of the air strike the eardrum. This converts the sound waves into a mechanical vibration. So the eardrum is actually moving up and down, similarly to what the membrane of a drum, a real drum that we would play as a musical instrument. Similarly, that is also a mechanical vibration. The outer ear has three main functions. The first function is to protect the very fine mechanisms inside the ear. The second function that it has is to amplify the sound waves that are received. So it amplifies this by channeling the sound waves into this the canal, which is a hollow little tube-shaped instrument. And this design causes a reverberation of the sound waves inside this very small little tube-like space. So what it does is it is amplifying the frequencies that are heard. And typically it amplifies from 3 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz. So it is making very soft sounds much louder so that they can actually be heard easily by the person. And the third main function of the outer ear is sound localization. So this is your ability to determine, to pick up where the source of sound is. So we have two ears, one on either side of our heads. And this ability of each ear to work independently but together, so each ear is hearing the sound from a particular source. So we are hearing effectively in stereo, two ears hearing different sounds. But the sounds are not arriving at the ears at exactly the same time. So because the sounds have a slight difference when they arrive, we are able to perceive where the sound is coming from. So when the source of the sound is directly in front of us, then the sound wave will reach both ears at exactly the same time and at exactly the same intensity. So the source of the sound will be perceived as being straight ahead of us. So this ability is called binaural hearing. So bin means two. So we have two ears and they are working together to perceive very, very small, slight degrees of difference. And it's millionths of a second that the difference is that the sound arrives in your left or your right ear slightly differently. So therefore we can tell which direction the sound is coming from. So our binaural ability to localize sound, the source of a sound, is amazingly sensitive, and this allows us to navigate very effectively in the world around us. So if a person has hearing loss in one ear, we call it unilateral hearing loss. So uni meaning one, and lateral's got to do with the sides of the body. So unilateral is hearing loss in one ear. If a person has loss of hearing in both ears, then it is referred to as bilateral, bi meaning two, bilateral hearing loss. There is loss of hearing in both ears. Okay, so that is the key things that are happening with the outer ear. And we now move from the outer ear into the middle ear, and then we're going to move onto the inner ear. So the sound waves have come down the canal. They've hit the tympanic membrane and set the membrane moving. And now on the other side of the tympanic membrane are three very tiny little bones. These little bones are called ossicles, and they each have a particular name. And so the first little bone is called the hammer, and the hammer is connected to the tympanic membrane. And as the tympanic membrane moves, so the little bone moves. So the signal is now changing its nature. It is being converted into a mechanical signal by the tympanic membrane that's moving these little bones. And the signal goes from one little bone to the next one, first to the hammer, then to the anvil, and then to the third little bone, which is shaped like the stirrup of a horse's saddle, and that little bone is connected to the inner ear. So we have movement from the tympanic membrane to the first bone, which is attached to that. The ossicle is the hammer, and then to the anvil, and then to the stirrup, which is the third bone, and the stirrup is attached to a little window, which is part of the inner ear. So it's these three little bones are the smallest bones in your ear, in your body, the smallest little bones in your body. And here is another picture of them, a more close-up, so that you can see clearly what's happening. The hammer is attached to the tympanic membrane. It sets, when the tympanic membrane vibrates, the little hammer vibrates, and then the anvil, and it moves the stirrup. So this one is moving this little very, very fine window over here. So we are moving from a bigger surface area of the eardrum to a very small surface area within the inner ear, and that sets another set of vibrations going inside the inner ear. So these three little bones are called ossicles, and they have Latin names. The hammer is the malleus, which is the Latin name for hammer, and the anvil's Latin name is the incus, and the stirrup's Latin name is the stapes. So these little ossicles are mechanical vibrations. They are actually physical little bones that are vibrating and moving inside the liquid of your middle ear. And so the middle ear is coupling the sound that comes from your tympanic membrane, from the eardrum, to the things that are inside the inner ear. So the vibratory portion is acting as a lever, and it is concentrating the sound. So the sound that is happening around the eardrum is a much larger surface area, the three little bones concentrate that sound into the oval window, which is over here. So the sound, very fine sounds, can be heard because the sound has been concentrated and amplified again at the place of this where the stirrup is connected to the inner ear. So around these little bones in the area surrounding the middle ear, there are various muscles, and these muscles are activated by very loud noises. And so what happens is, if you are in a place where there is noise that is potentially harmful to the ear, these muscles contract around the little ossicles and they dampen the sound, they dampen the amount of movement that the ossicles can make. And so this is a protective factor for your ear. We know that ears get damaged, and these little bones can get damaged very easily by lots of continual loud and noise that's of a certain frequency. So very high pitched and very loud noises can damage these little bones. They're very, very fine, and so the muscles around them that contract are called the acoustic reflex, and this is to protect the ear and to dampen the sound so that they don't get damaged. Now, another structure that is associated with the middle ear is this tube which leads from the middle ear, the cavity in the middle ear, and it leads down into the nasal and pharyngeal cavities of your nose and your pharynx. And so this tube is connecting the air pressure from the ear, from outside into the middle ear. And so it is a mechanism that is keeping the pressure the same. If children have a cold or people have a runny nose, then a lot of mucus can get into the eustachian tube, and this can cause an inflammation. So this is effectively open to the nasal cavity. So if there's excess mucus or some kind of bacterial inflammation, there can be an infection that comes up into the middle ear. And when this part of the ear is infected, it is called otitis media, and it is a very painful ear infection. So when children have runny noses and colds and flus, one needs to be mindful of the fact that they could also be having an infection in the ear, and it can be extremely sore. Children will cry and babies will be uncontrollable, and one does need to seek a doctor for treatment, and there are lots of medications that can be given to help with this. If it is left untreated, it can damage the mechanism of these very fine little bones that work together, and it can damage these little membranes, so hearing loss can occur, and this is not an area that can be fixed very easily. It's not like breaking a bone that a doctor can heal. So we need to be very careful with our hearing and ensure that if children do have any difficulties with hearing, that they are referred to somebody who can help them in the medical profession as quickly as possible. Okay, so the sound has traveled down the eustachian tube, through the tympanic membrane. It has gone through the mechanism of the three little ossicles and now to the oval window of the inner ear. So we're now going to move to what is happening in the inner ear. So the inner ear contains a whole set of convoluted tube-like structures. And these structures have two main functions. So we're first going to look at this one over here, which is like a snail-like structure, and it is called the cochlea. So the cochlea is got to do with sound, and so the sound has traveled through the middle ear, the three little bones of the middle ear, and it is now traveling into the cochlea, where the sound is picked up by the little fine hair-like sensory nerves that are inside the cochlea. It is filled with gel-like fluid, and it is a waterproof little tube so that this fluid doesn't leak out. And so it is moving. The fluid vibrates from the little the stirrup of the middle ear, sets the cochlea moving at this oval window over here. So it's a very fine membrane, and it sets the liquid that's inside this cochlea, it sets the liquid to moving, and it is in there, in this very, very fine membrane, that the liquid is set into motion, and the nerves, it becomes a neural signal. So the sound becomes a set of nerve signals that we can then pick up in our brain as sound. So the cochlea is a key little organ, and its most important function is to convert the signals that have come in via the three little bones into an electrical signal via the nerves, and then that goes via the cochlear nerve down to the brain. So it is a very fine, very complex organ, and that has got to do with the sound. We're also going to look just now at these things over here called the semicircular canals, and those have got to do with our sense of balance and equilibrium, and nothing to do with the sense of sound. So the inner ear has got to do with receiving sound signals and converting them into the electrical signals that go into nerves, and it has got to do with our sense of balance and where we are in space. So let's just have a look quickly at what has happened with the sound. And here is a slide that puts it all together. So the sound waves have been received by the outer ear. They have passed through the canal to the tympanic membrane, being converted into a solid mechanical state. They then pass through the three little bones, and comes a vibration inside the liquid of the cochlea, and then it gets converted into electrochemical signals inside the cochlear little nerve endings, and then it goes as an electrical signal down the auditory nerve and to the brain. So what is happening inside the cochlea is that this snail-shaped little organ over here is able to pick up particularly sounds that are in the band that the human voice generates sound. So our ears are finely attuned to the vibrations that are naturally made by human voices. So our voice boxes making sound, and our ears are structured to pick up the sound of human voices. So the human voice generates sound in the peak frequencies between of 1 kilohertz to 3 kilohertz, and the ear is able to pick up sound in these particular frequencies. So it's very highly specialized structure. So if you can have a look, there's another diagram to show how the sound is moving through the outer ear, through the middle ear, and into the cochlea of the inner ear. So inside the cochlea, this is a diagrammatic, schematic cross-section of what's happening inside the cochlea. It's a very, very fine membrane, and it is filled with liquid and gel, this very fine membrane filled with a gel-like liquid, and there are millions and millions of little hair-like, the ends of little nerves. So each one of these little hair-like structures are the endings of the nerves of the ear, and these are called hair cells because these little endings are very, very fine hairs, microscopically fine hairs. And so when the liquid moves, these little hairs move in the liquid, and so then they set the nerve, they activate the nerve when these little hairs move, and then the nerve sends an electrical signal down to the brain. So these very, very fine neural nervous neurons in the cochlea are finely attuned to very, very small movements that are happening of the liquid, the gel inside the cochlea. So they are very, very fragile, and they are subject to a lot of stress, these hair cells and these little fine hairs, and they can actually break off and be damaged. So if someone is subjecting their ears to very high frequencies, very loud music, if there is inadequate nutrition and oxygen available for these little neurons, they can also be damaged, and they often will be damaged from just a lifetime of use. So we'll find that many people over the age of 60 or older will start to lose their hearing, and mostly because these fine little hairs at the ends of the cochlear neurons are damaged and are not able to pick up the sounds anymore because they have been exposed so often, and they get damaged. So this is a cross section to the cochlea, and now we're going to have a look. So this is something that you would see very, this is a schematic, but if you had to look at it, you'd have to have a very, very fine microscope to see what's going on with those nerves over there. So to go back to the cross section of the ear, so here's the outer ear, sound comes through the canal, through the tympanic membrane, through the ossicles, and gets picked up by the oval ear. And this is the cochlea that has been straightened out. So usually you will see it curled up in a snail-like fashion. And what the open people have studied, what happens at different stages of the cochlea, and it is picking up different frequencies as one moves along the cochlea, so it is able to pick up the different frequencies. So very high frequencies picked up at this end, and as one moves to the far end, it's picking up low frequencies, so the lower, deeper sounds. So it is got many fine little hair-like structures, hair-like cells all the way down, and they are picking up vibrations at different frequencies and at different amplitudes. The frequency gives us the pitch of the sound, and amplitude gives us the loudness and the softness of the sound. So that is what the cochlea looks like if it's straightened out, but it actually is curled up like a snail. And so here you can see that at the very top end there are the low frequencies, and then the deep sounds there, and the high sounds over here. So it is graded, and that means that we can hear and we can sing and we can listen to musical instruments in a variety with a very a wide range of different pitches. So it is tuned, and you can think of it as like a guitar string or so that allows you to stretch it, and it can be pitched at different pitches. So each of the groups of cells along the cochlea are dedicated to picking up sounds of different pitch and different frequencies. So it's very complicated and highly specialized sensory organ. And what could happen is that these get damaged, and so people can lose particular frequencies that they can't pick up, because those particular cells of the cochlea, the little hairs, are damaged and they're not picking it up. So this can result in hard of hearing, and there can be certain sounds that people are unable to hear. So sometimes one would need to speak louder or in a different pitch if someone's lost certain of those particular sounds. So that is the system of collecting sounds, and we're going to have a look at the other function of the ear, which is in the semicircular canals. So the semicircular canals, there are 3 of them, and they are inside the inner ear, very fine tube-like structures filled with a gel liquid, and they are part of what's called the vestibular system. So the vestibular system is a system responsible for providing us with information about our position in space. So where is the head positioned? It gives us spatial orientation. This allows us to stabilize our head, to keep it upright. It allows us to keep our balance. These three semicircular canals are set in three different planes of vertical and horizontal and to the side. So as you move your head and the liquid moves inside these semicircular canals, they're filled with liquid, and they are also hair-like cells inside these tubes. So this is a cross-section of one of these tubes. These hair-like cells are also moving and picking up movement. And so depending on where you have your head positioned, the liquid inside these canals is moving and giving feedback to your brain as to where the body is. It helps us to orientate, to maintain our posture, to keep your head upright. If you bend forward, you can get back upright. And so these little semicircular canals are helping us to keep our balance and give us a sense of gravity and our spatial orientation. If these things are not working, then we get all sorts of different side effects from that. So the vestibular system, if it doesn't function properly, then someone will feel you'll be disorientated, feeling dizzy, feeling off balance. It can make people feel like you're floating, or that the world is spinning around you. So it's really important that the vestibular system is not damaged, and that can also get damaged if there's some kind of a hearing infection. So it's the vestibular system and your eyes, your semicircular canals, your orientation, and your visual system, and the feedback from your proprioception, all the nerves that are attached to the ends of your body, your skin and your joints. All of this is giving feedback to the brain so that it knows where the body is positioned and where it is in space. Now, all of this is something that is developing as a child develops, and as the child grows, they get better at figuring out where they are in space, using their bodies, and being able to do complex things like play ball and play tennis and ride bicycles. And these are all things that can only happen if the vestibular system is functioning well and functioning accurately. So that takes us to the end of this amazing organ of our ears, which has got very fine parts that are so finely attuned to our human voices and to hearing the world around us in all its differences, the animals and the music and all the sounds that we're able to hear. So what we're going to do in the next lecture is we're going to have a look at some of the impairments, some of the things, and as you can see, being such a fine organ, there are many parts that could potentially show difficulty, and so this can lead to a range of hearing impairments and deafness, and we're going to have a look at some of those and how we can help as educators and what the things are that we can do to support learners in their learning. So thank you very much for that, and I hope you're able to download this video recording and listen to it again. Remember to read the notes that have been put up, the chapters of the textbooks, so that you can make an adequate summary of the sense of hearing and all the terms that go around auditory perception. So bye for now, and I'll see you at the next lecture.